All right, we'll go ahead and get this meeting to order. Nathan, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember McPherson.
Here.
Councilmember Biggs.
Here.
Councilmember Laraway.
Yes.
Council President Bruce.
Here.
Mayor Steer.
Here, and if you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item is the consent agenda.
Anyone have anything? No. Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as published.
Motion's made and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Nathan, would you poll the council?
Councilmember McPherson.
Yes.
Councilmember Biggs.
Yes.
Councilmember Laraway.
Yes.
Council President Bruce.
Yes.
And that motion carries. That takes us to public comment. I had one person sign in. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council but didn't get a chance to sign in? Okay, Beverly Wolf.
Beverly Wolf, 3420 West Commemoration Avenue, Meridian. Thank you for always hearing me. I bring dissent sometimes, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. I've only been in CUNA for a couple of years, and when we first visited Idaho about 4 years ago, it was really beautiful, and I've seen a lot of change just in the 2 years I've lived here, and I come here because of that, because of what I hear, what I've seen, what I've learned in the last 2 years coming to these meetings. Part of tonight is about schools because I'm sure it's coming up again, the bonds or the levies or whatever the new flavor for financing is. And the reason I'm speaking on it tonight is because twice now in these chambers, I'm not going to name names, I've heard a comment made about, well, I guess parents just aren't feeling enough pain yet. And every time I hear it, I want to scream. Because why don't you, and I don't mean you, whoever said it, why don't you think parents have enough pain? Are they not paying enough taxes? Are they not paying enough insurance? They're not paying enough for groceries or their insurance. It's said, it's a proverb, poor people are the rich man's slaves. Borrow money and you're the lender's slave. Well, I'm still under the slave of the last bond that was put in 2017 that said it was only going to go for 10 years. Well, that would make it, I'm going to be out of it in 2027, right? Well, until you read the fine print. All these things come across in marketing with a 10-year plan, and then you never hear about the 20 years of interest that still have to be paid after that. So I'm just wondering, as one of the little we the people who would like to stay here and not be priced out of the market, because, I'm not getting younger. I'm in the older category. But, when is wisdom part of the decision? When is it not fear of lawsuit? When is it not the developer first or who has the right to do something with their property, which I've also learned is not always even a citizen of this state or even the country. So I always love to read this from the last page of your appendix on the CUNA Comprehensive Plan. Nothing in the United States Constitution's Fifth Amendment requires a government entity to promote the maximum development of a site at the expense of the public purse or to the detriment of the public interest. Taxpayers need not subsidize unwise development. Well, I've also learned attending these meetings that I'm pretty sure our taxes are going to go up on the next budget allocation. And oh, by the way, I've also learned that you're understaffed in your police department by at least 8 people, but they only asked for 2. That's a little scary. How fast and how far can you grow without catching up? When is it okay to stop? And the M word may not be so bad. It's just an opinion, and I thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. You had that down just right on the button. All right. Next, we have an outstanding citizen recognition. Today, we are recognizing Veronica Vigilant for her exceptional courage and quick action that she displayed while assisting a fellow citizen on June 27, 2024, during an incident where a jack collapsed on a man fixing his truck. Ms. Vigilant called 911 and performed first aid until the paramedics arrived. She demonstrated selflessness and unwavering commitment to the safety of others. She was nominated by Nicole Bouvier of CUNA Counseling Center. So Veronica, if you want to come forward.
That's great.
Thank you so very much. Also on one side it says our hometown, and thank you for being a part of our hometown.
Thank you.
Marcy Durant has a CUNA Food Bank update for us.
Thanks for letting me come. I didn't time my presentation, so I'm worried that sound is going to go off way before I'm
Nobody will
prepared.
yell at you for food bank stuff.
I'm grateful for this time to come. I wanted to share that this is a photo of some of our volunteers, and we have about 45 volunteers that work regularly at the CUNA Food Bank, and it's just become this hub of opportunity for service groups to come in. One of my favorite things is when somebody calls who's called every nonprofit in the valley trying to get community service hours coordinated, and it's really difficult to get that done, but we enjoy the challenge of being as flexible as we can to make that work for individuals, and it's always turned into just an awesome opportunity and a win-win for everybody involved. And those individuals that are helped, they'll often come back and serve even beyond their community service hours, and it's been really positive. Did I give you a picture of that van? Okay. Yeah. I got to learn this tech stuff. I am not very good at all. But we were recently gifted a retired vehicle from the Idaho Food Bank that it's about 22 years old, but covered with cracked vinyl of Idaho Food Bank logos. And one of our, a young man who needed community service hours just timed his call perfectly. And with his auto detailing experience, he got that van polished up really good, and Creative Wraps put a new logos on it. And so now we're promoting the CUNA Food Bank on that van. And anyway, he's super proud of it, and we're really grateful for his help. The Idaho Food Bank also recently informed us that we're one of only 5 pantries in the state of Idaho that distribute food the way that we do. Yeah, it's a real eye-opener. The trend is for food pantries to gather their volunteers, have all their donations on site, and those donations are arbitrarily put into boxes, and then open drive-through times are scheduled for patrons to come through, and boxes are handed through windows. And it's understood, and lots of those volunteers at each pantry will tell the recipients, we know this isn't very much, but you can go to the other pantry down the street or that pantry, so the patrons are having to drive from place to place. It's a really difficult way to get help with food. And the food bank, the CUNA Food Bank, does it completely different and has for years and years. And it's our goal to always maintain this practice of providing the equivalent of your grocery store trip, to where it actually makes a difference within a household budget where they can reallocate funds as they need to. They're able to call the food bank for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and get their feet under them again and get that medical expense paid or whatever it might be. And then we don't hear from them for a long time. The studies prove over and over again that this method of distributing food is the most successful way to do it, but it requires a lot of people and a lot of resources. And thankfully, we live in a community that widely supports that cause, and whenever we have a need, we can voice it to an agency or a group, and it's supplied. You may be aware that the food bank just relocated to a warehouse space that was offered by Mike Smith. We outgrew the basement in the Methodist Church a couple of years ago, and it's so wonderful to be in this new space where we have a little bit of breathing room, no tight corners, and it's working out a lot better. But of course, that's not the solution. Before we go to the next thing, we can't even see it. So let me just read the numbers, and it's probably good because I have a major addition mistake in there, or didn't even attempt the math at all on that 2024 year. But you can see if we look back, if we just look at the month of July, in 2022, we did 81 food orders that month, serving 75 households. In 2023, that July, we did 108 food orders, serving 97 households. And this past July, we did 307 food orders, serving 178 individual households. So just so in 2022, the total individuals served was 309 compared to this July, 676 individuals. The number I really am grateful for that we're here is especially with our seniors and the children. In 2022, we served 27 seniors that month of July, and 106 children. This past July, it was 90 seniors and 279 children in the 1 month. And most people aren't aware too that the food bank stocks and funds the Ross School Pantry. And Terry and I are able to meet monthly. And between the two, we only have about a 3% overlap, which I think is pretty incredible. And we're pretty proud of that we're able to reach those different demographics without duplicating our efforts too much at all. Another important number is that first-time households served. If you take that number and put it up against the individual households served, we average 20 to 25% every single month of households calling a food bank for the very first time. And that's been pretty consistent since 2022. It's really sobering. So out of those 178 households that we served last month, 46 of them were contacting a food bank for the very first time. And the stories all just range across the board, and just makes me really grateful that the safety net is within our community, that when people fall on hard times, they can look to the food bank for that little bit of assistance. And we do it in such a way that they're not humiliated, the dignity is maintained. We request of them to consider what they have and actually state their needs rather than us just going through a list saying, well, we've got this, and this. We actually encourage them to hang up the phone, look at what they already have, consider what they like to cook and feed their family, and prepare that list, and then call us with the definition of their needs, and it works out so good. And we can almost always meet every single need stated because of the variety of donations that are received from our neighbors. 90% of what is stocked in the CUNA Food Bank and 90% of the funds that come to the CUNA Food Bank are right from our next door neighbors. I don't know. Idaho Food Bank tells me they have never seen another pantry work the same way, and so it's really something to be proud of. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the CUNA Food Bank. It started in 1994. And for 30 years, it's Volunteers of Assisted Neighbors in Need, and since 2006, it has helped start and keep the school district's pantry stocked and funded. The food bank's volunteers are committed to see that this vital work continues to move forward and provide essential services to anyone in Kuna and in our neighboring rural communities who need help during difficult times. As you're aware, we've been actively fundraising for an independent food bank building. As I met with one prospective donor a month ago, he did something miraculous. I was simply hoping he would be willing to put some of his own skin in the game so that I could go to others and say, hey, Tommy Alquist is putting in this much. Would you be willing to match that? Tommy has lived in Kuna now for just over 2.5 years, I believe, and he owns Ball Ventures Alquist. And he replied with, I will do better than that, Marcy. Let me take this off your shoulders. Give me a week or so and we'll have all the funding required. It really is a miracle. I remember being invited to sit down in early 2021 with Kathy Gailey, with Lisa Holland. The mayor was there, I think, Ted Weimer, and a bunch of others to talk about this very thing of what are we going to have in place as a city to help make sure the needs of Kuna are met as the years continue to progress. Everybody in that room recognized the population was going to be surging, developments were going to be continuing to come forward. It's really amazing that in that short time, that's less than 4 years, we now are going to be constructing this independent food bank building. We'd love to see it started before the end of the year. Our volunteers are anxious for that 30-year celebration, have it be community-wide, and I can't think of a better, more effective way to bring the community together than to turn that into a groundbreaking ceremony. Nobody in the food bank profits at all. It's completely 100% volunteer-driven. And now everybody who has decided to get involved in the construction of this building, they're not looking to make a profit. Everyone's being a contributor to the cause for a bigger purpose. And no one's in it for themselves or recognition or anything. I know at that time, a few years ago, or maybe that conversation didn't happen a few years ago, but the city was really committed to helping and making sure costs were reduced, that any possible roadblocks could be lifted, not in any illegal kind of way, of course, but there are methods the city can take to ensure that those costs are decreased so that this can be something that can come to fruition. I was really sad when Bonnie Heinrich, who's managing the project for us, came back to me and told me how much these new costs were going to be. And I just want to invite the city that just as everyone else is putting their own skin in the game, that the city would do the same as well, that there's got to be a way to decrease those expenses. This isn't a building that's going to be occupied by a ton of people at one time. We're only open a couple hours a day, and there may be a few evenings a week where there may be people there. Those costs, there is so much room for those costs to come down, and I want to invite, I figure this is the best public forum. Everyone involved in the processes are here, and I appreciate the opportunity to extend that invitation to everyone to look at those numbers and see what can be tightened up to make sure that this building that provides such a vital service and adds so much to the health and well-being of the community as a whole can come to fruition sooner than later. Everything's going to be in place for us to start as soon as we have those approvals, and we're just finishing up with the last requirements for the design review. And anyway, we're really excited, and I want to make sure that the city's a partner in that whole process, and that we can make this a big community celebration getting started this year and celebrating the 30th anniversary, and continue forward for years and years to come, making sure our neighbors have the help when we're all going to have a turn. And it's nice to know there's a food bank nearby, supported by the community, that we can call on when our turn comes around. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody about this project yet, so I don't know what they've brought forth, but any costs that we control that we can do something with, we will certainly make sure we do that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so certain. All right, that takes us to business item number A, consideration to approve a request from Patagonia Development LLC, Patagonia Lakes Development LLC, and West Park Company Incorporated, and Hayden Homes of Idaho LLC for a partial reassignment of the Patagonia East Ridge and Lake Subdivision Recorded Development Agreement. Troy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For the record, Troy B. Hoonan, Senior Planner, CUNA Planning and Zoning Department. So the development agreement that was recorded for the Patagonia East Lakes and Ridge subdivision back in October of last year, the original developer has someone who's interested in purchasing part of that overall subdivision, not the whole thing, just some of it. And they would like a partial reassignment to take on some of those responsibilities themselves. And that's what this agreement is all about. Heath Clark with Clark Wardle is here tonight if you have any specific questions. But I'm also here if you have any questions about the overall development as well.
And so could you maybe explain a little deeper into what that reassignment looks like? Is there any changes to the development agreement, or is it just reassigning the same development agreement to a new owner?
For the record, Troy B. Hoonan again. That's a great question, Mr. Mayor. There are no changes to the development agreement, just a reassignment of obligations, performance obligations.
Okay. Yes.
Is this something we normally do or have done in the past?
Development agreements are done frequently, but this is the first partial reassignment.
Yes.
Question for you, is there anything under the original Patagonia development agreement that has not been brought up to date as far as pumps, pipeline, anything that is going to be handed over to this next company?
For the record, Troy B. Hoonan, good question, Councilmember Laraway. Right now, they have not started any kind of construction for the portion that will be reassigned these obligations. So, however, the original developer, West Park, let's call it West Park Company, they are getting ready to record the first plat in Patagonia East. So yes, infrastructure has been extended to and through that site, but the part of the development agreement affected by this partial reassignment has yet to even begin.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
Mark Bybee, City Attorney, just to answer, I think it's Council President Bruce that asked if we've done this before. My recollection is actually last year, this same DA, there was a proposed partial reassignment that the council did approve, and then that transaction that fell between the current developer and the buy-in developer fell through, so the assignment actually ended up not happening, and so the council approved one of these before. It was actually on the same DA, different buyer the last time. This one's structured slightly different because the last one was a single purchase. This one, there's two purchases, and so it's gonna be like a phased reassignment. So there's two agreements for each portion of the purchase, if that makes sense. But it's to the same, each purchase is to the same new developer. It's just they're phasing it. I think Mr. Clark could speak more to why that's happening, but I just wanted to point out the council actually had seen this before with a different buyer.
Thank you. Yes.
Once this is done, Troy, will they be able to change anything that's already been approved, like for the layout, or do they have that option to come back and? and change just that portion? So if they buy this and say, hey, we don't want to build it like we already agreed.
For the record, Troy Buchanan, that's a great question, Councilmember Bruce, Council President Bruce. There are no proposed changes to the development agreement, which means there's no proposed changes to the approved preliminary plat. So if in the event that they would like to change something, material or by design, they would have to come back for council's approval, and if it rises to that occasion, they would have to do another public hearing in order to make those changes. But this does not propose any changes at all to what's already been approved.
Yes, go ahead.
How many, and I don't know if you could answer this, but how many dwelling units are we talking about in this phase that we are transferring over?
Councilmember Laraway, for the record, Troy Buchanan, I'm not sure, but this portion of the project, so there's 3 different subdivisions, all within the same application. There's Patagonia East, Patagonia Lakes, and Patagonia Ridge. This represents the 3rd and final subdivision, which is roughly half of what was approved, roughly. I don't know the number.
Ballpark figure? I won't hold you to it.
290.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yes.
And if this project, if we did do the reassignment, and there was a certain number of EDUs that were assigned to this project as a whole, who would get to pull them first? If he started building, they would be his, and then,
That's an excellent question. Mark, for the record, Troy Buchanan, Mark Bybee and I have had that discussion, and Mark and Heath have discussed that as well.
Yeah, so that was a concern of mine too, sorry, Mark Bybee, City Attorney. So when I reviewed this, that was a concern that I spoke to Mr. Clark about, because the EDUs for this preliminary plat, they were approved because this developer actually helped build some infrastructure, and that was essentially the purchase agreement, is we granted them EDUs in order to pay for that sewer infrastructure that they constructed. And so the developer that would be the seller here, they possess those, they belong to that developer, but we also put a caveat in that agreement related to, granting those EDUs that they're unique to these parcels. They're not something that they can say, well, I have, the 500 whatever EDUs, and I'm gonna sell some of this and take them across town to another piece of land. They're unique to those, and so, speaking with Mr. Clark, there is an agreement, which we're not a party to as a city. It's not something we'll agree to, but they're going to be selling EDUs to this developer as well, and so and I have told them, look, there's no way that person can come and use the EDUs without the proof, and so we're at some point gonna have to be made aware as a city, because if this buyer here were to show up and say, hey, I'm developing this, until they can actually show they have the EDUs, they wouldn't get approval. So that's an assignment agreement that has to happen where they obtain the portion of these EDUs to be able to actually develop it. I hope that makes sense how I explained that. I was a little all over the place.
no, I just wanted to make sure that we're not just, because we're essentially creating, two developments. I just didn't want them to.
Yeah, we're not creating new EDUs, and that was something that absolutely came up. That was probably my primary concern when I saw this, is how is this new developer gonna have EDUs, and that's something that there is another agreement that's going on for the purchase and assignment of a portion of the EDUs.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Mr. Clark, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about this, and I might be able to add a few things to help.
You want to hear from?
It's your show. I'm just here.
Yeah, if you want, go ahead and come on up and state your name and address for the record.
Mayor and Council, Heath Clark, 251 East Front Street in Boise, representing the West Park Company. And I thought I'd just give a little bit of background. So this is something that we've asked for, not looking for any sort of special treatment or a favor or anything out of the ordinary. It's based largely on the language of the development agreement that speaks to council needing to provide approval whenever there's a complete assignment of a development agreement. So in this case, we're assigning the rights to that portion of the property. And so out of an abundance of caution, spoke with Mark, and we decided that it probably makes the most sense to bring this to you and just allow you to rubber stamp that, so that the council is very much aware that that property is transferring. To Troy's point, the development agreement runs with the land, right? So the development agreement is going to be a binding obligation of any subsequent owner. This is sort of a dotting of the I and crossing of the T's that we're talking about here. Then with regard to the EDUs, there are no new EDUs that are being created. West Park has the contractual right to a certain number of EDUs, and there's 287 that are associated with this property, so Troy was pretty darn close. And the arrangement is that we will provide an assignment document at closing that says you, buyer, have these EDUs, and then they can march over to the city and say, okay, these of the ones that West Park has, we now have this portion of them. So hopefully that clarifies all of that. Not creating any new development rights, not changing anything, dotting I's and crossing T's.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anything further?
Greg?
No.
Biggs?
I'm just wondering, is there anything that prohibits, I guess, in this development agreement to accelerate the development in any way compared to the other? Or is it all gonna be applied for just like anything else? So, I mean, now we have two different owners on the same, in the same section. I guess that's what I'm asking.
For the record, Shelby Hoonan, I think I understand your question. You just want to find out scheduling and timing of construction, correct? Okay. So I had a detailed conversation with Mike Borzik in Public Works about this. The agreement that the city has with West Park for the sewer expansion, a lot of those EDUs are already reserved because of their contribution to that system. So certainly with two developers working on the same project, yes, the timeline is going to be compressed. And so we're going to get to the finish line sooner, but with our limit to 40 EDUs per phase, and developers usually only do one phase, maybe a little bit more than one phase per year, and there's like 18 phases here. We've got several years before the end actually is reached. Certainly sooner than just one developer, but they are welcome to, I mean, if approved, then they would be welcome to proceed in the same fashion without restriction.
So, okay, so if I'm following you then, so the original phased approach, they had 18 phases, and these were supposed to be 15, 16, 17, 18, hypothetically. Now those can go at whatever, at basically when they want to, as long as they have the EDUs.
That would be correct.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay?
So the sewer will be built out by the original developer prior to the other developer having access to it? I think that's what you're asking, right? Is will the agreement be met prior to?
Basically, yeah.
For the record, Doug Hanson, CUNA Planning and Zoning staff. So the sewer infrastructure, irrigation, sewer water pressurized irrigation, that's all something that gets installed after a preliminary plat is approved on a phase-by-phase basis. So not all that is installed at once. So for phase one, before the city will sign a final plat to bring it to record with the county so they can start getting C of Os and building, they need to install all of that infrastructure. So if it is hypothetically phases 15, 16, 17, like you asked, it's likely that the portion that the partial assignment is being transferred to will still construct on a similar timeline because it won't pencil out for them to pull services further. When the initial developer is building those in a phased approach, they'll likely wait until it's ready to stub directly into, because that won't be as much of a cost burden as well.
Think so.
Okay?
Mark, how do you want this worded, the motion? Do you want this motion worded a certain way?
Do you have a resolution or no? So it'd just be a motion to authorize or approve the partial assignment of the DA. You could say the name of the DA, but that's what it is.
Partial reassignment?
Yeah, partial reassignment.
Just assignment.
Assignment. I make a motion that we approve the partial assignment from Patagonia Development LLC between Patagonia LLC, Lakes Development LLC, and West Park Company, Inc., and Hayden Homes of Idaho LLC.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And that motion carries. Next, we have consideration to approve the findings and fact and conclusions of law for case numbers 23-06 AN and 2305-S Bristle Creek subdivision. Troy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Shelby Hoonan. Council members, thank you. The only reason why staff has prepared a memo for this particular item, because normally findings of fact are, or a written decision is not on this portion of the agenda. It's usually a consent agenda. But the change this time is because you'll notice that the format is very different than what council has seen in the past. It's more streamlined, and it is something that Mark Bybee and staff has been working on to follow a better format in the event that there's a challenge.
Yes, Mark.
Mark Bybee, City Attorney. So to shed a little more light on that, there's been some recent Idaho Supreme Court case law related to land use decisions. A phrase that is oft repeated in those decisions that I've seen is a reasoned statement, that we need to have a reasoned statement that comes from the requirements of LUPA. And if you consider the decisions you've been signing for a number of years now, they're called findings of fact, conclusions of law and order. We refer to them as FCOs a lot. And so this is a shift to recognize that Supreme Court case law and trying to make decisions that are more consistent. I can tell you the structure is a little bit different, the substance is different, and it's a result of, I've looked at case law and I've basically said, what is the Supreme Court telling us our decisions need to have? And so the sections in here, I'll tell you, I caused quite a bit of consternation for Troy on this to kind of get this put into the format and to have the right substantive findings in there, to be consistent with what I think the Supreme Court is telling us our city decisions must be. And so that's kind of the driving force behind this. And in particular, like the section about relevant criteria and standards, factual findings, and then in the factual findings, there's a subsection called relevant contested facts. And that's the part that definitely was a shift in identifying what were contested facts, who was contesting them, and ultimately, eventually, this section that's council's findings of fact on relevant contested facts. And so if you think about this, when there's a contested fact, you could have one person come and saying the sky is blue, someone else is saying it's orange. Council hears it, and when you make your determination, you say, well, what did we find? We heard those two versions of testimony and people fighting about what the color of the sky is. Well, we find the sky to be blue, right? And so it has provisions like that where you're actually identifying that there was a fact contest about something, whether it's a member of the public or somebody else offering some contest to maybe an engineering report or the opinion of the developer, and then the council's conclusion on that. And so those factual findings happen in section 2, where it concludes with the subsection C in there, where there's this council's factual findings on these relevant contested facts, where you're actually saying, here's 2 versions of facts we were presented, that's up in B, and then in C, this is what we found to actually be the facts. Does that kind of make sense on that? And it ends with a reasoned statement, which is a rationale for the city's decision based on the criteria that was in front of it. Now, in other decisions, if this wasn't solely based on an annexation, there would be a lot more, or not a lot more, but there'd be more sections than what's in here. Since this is an annexation, we eliminated some sections. If this had LUPA permits that were being decided, like a rezone or a pre-plat, there would be more sections addressing some other parts that need to be in there for those. But nonetheless, this reasoned statement in subsection 3, I'm drawing this to the council's attention because this is my attempt to capture what I think the council was saying on this application. And I think this is a fairly strong position the council is taking if it adopts this, this paragraph in section 3, and I want to make sure it actually matches what the council believes. So I'm drawing your attention specifically to that, asking you to read it before voting, and if there's a reason to deliberate or directions to staff that actually you missed it, go back and fix it, then let's get that in before this is signed.
I think
Yes,
it looks good.
Councilmember Ruth.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think it looks
Okay,
good.
good.
I read it, I thought it was great.
Yeah,
Makes it easier.
looks like you've done that before.
You captured.
This is the first rendition of this decision for me, or this format, so it was, some close reading of case law and saying, what are they actually saying we need to do, and like these section headings are using language from case law, actually, just as an FYI.
Thank you.
And Troy pulled most his hair out during that conversation, so.
So can I ask Mark, just so I just want to make sure that, is this only going to be for denials? Or just for any?
It's gonna be for all of our decisions, they're gonna follow this format, we need to be having these reasoned statements in all of them, we need to be resolving fact contests, so that goes to, you may remember there's a conversation me and Troy had with you probably 2 or 3 months ago where we were talking about, we're probably gonna interject and say, hey, we got some members of the public arguing this, we have the developer saying this, we have an engineer report saying this. What is the council's decision on that? What's the facts? Like, what did you conclude is, for lack of a better term, reality here? What do you, does that make sense? And so to make this format work, there's gonna be instances where we're gonna say, look, we as staff are sitting here hearing 2 people saying different things about the same thing. We need you guys to decide what is the fact, what's reality. So I will tell you that makes those types of decisions, if there's an appeal, they're gonna zero in on those things, and so we gotta be deliberate about doing that, and those findings of fact must actually be supported by evidence in the record and not just conjecture or heartburn that you're having that day. They need to be supported by things that were presented to the council.
And I guess you would come back to us for feedback if you didn't quite capture whether we just had heartburn or something.
Yeah.
Like in this case, this was a denial, and there was a, pretty obvious reason why. But if there wasn't, then that's something you would probably come back to us for more explanation during the decision-making process.
Yes.
Thanks.
Capture the essence.
Yeah, I think it's a really good clarification of what was discussed and how you came to that decision. And, I think, I like it a lot better. It's a better format. Okay, anything further?
Yes, I got a question, Troy. If possible, can I get a copy of this one section in paper? Because once we're out of here, we get rid of it, it's gonna be hard to go back and try to find this.
I will have a copy of the written reasoned decision for you before I leave.
Okay? All right, we need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, for the record, Doug Hanson, CUNA Planning and Zoning staff. If you choose to approve, in your approval this evening, can you please make that approve the decision and reason statement for case numbers 23-06AN and 23-05-S? Rather than the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
All right, say that again.
Where it reads, approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law, we need that to be approve the decision and reason statement.
And will it be changed for all of the future ones like this?
That's correct.
Anybody have anything else? I make a motion that we approve the decision and reason statement for case number 2306 AN and 2305S.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? And that motion carries.
Thank you, Mark. And team.
And Troy.
Team, Troy.
Consideration to approve ordinance 2024-19. Municipal rezone ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cuna, making certain findings and declarations of authority and rezoning certain real property, to wit, Ada County Assessor Parcel number S13014388810, owned by Toll Southwest LLC, situated within the corporate limits of the City of Cuna, Ada County, Idaho, and amending the zoning map and directing the city engineer and city clerk and providing an effective date.
I make a motion that we waive 3 readings of ordinance number 2024-19.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to waive the 3 readings. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I make a motion that we consider the approved ordinance of 2024-19 as published.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded for approval. Is there any further discussion? Nathan, would you poll the council?
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Biggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Laraway?
Yes.
Council President Bruce?
Yes.
And that motion carries. The only other thing we have on the agenda tonight is an executive session. There's a couple things we need to talk about. There will be no decisions made at this executive session. You're welcome to stay until after we're finished with that. Basically, we're going to come out and say that information was received, no action was taken. So
I make a motion
enjoy the
that,
rest of your evening.
you need a motion to?
Yes, please.
I make a motion that we move to executive session under section 74-206C.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to enter executive session under 74-20C. Nathan, would you poll the
Also,
council?
section F as well, I believe.
Oh, and section F.
Section F, yes.
Councilmember McPherson?
Yes.
Councilmember Biggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Laraway?
Yes.
Council President Bruce?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. We need Mark,
Hey, Beverly?
Morgan,